Okay, so today we're diving into a major controversy brewing in the Indian state of Meghalaya. There's a new law in the books that was supposed to be all about progress, but instead it sparked some really serious fears of what's being called a great land grab. We're going to break down what's really going on here.
And really, it all boils down to this one question. Is the government selling Meghalaya to the highest bidder? I mean, that question really gets to the heart of the debate, right? It frames this whole thing as this high-stakes battle for the future of the entire region.
So how can a single law be seen in two completely different ways? On one hand, it's a path to progress. On the other, it's a direct threat to a homeland. That's the puzzle we're going to piece together today, looking at this clash between development and indigenous rights. All right, so let's start with the accusation itself. This idea of a great land grab. We're going to investigate exactly why critics are using such strong language for this new law in Meghalaya.
So, what is this law? What's the act that's at the very center of this whole debate?
Okay, so here it is. The law causing all this commotion is called the Meghalaya State Investment Promotion and Facilitation Act. Yeah, it's a mouthful, so we'll call it the MSIPF Act. And on paper, its purpose seems pretty straightforward. The government designed it to kickstart economic growth.
But this is where you get the two very different stories. You have the official goal, right? To promote economic development, bring in private investment. But then you have the controversy, the view from the ground, where indigenous communities see it as a direct threat to their land and their livelihood. Two completely opposite takes on the same law. So, what's causing all this fear? Well, the real concern for a lot of people comes down to one specific mechanism tucked inside this act. It's something called the land bank, and it has the potential to totally change who controls the land.
So what is a land bank? Well, think of it like this. It's a centralized pool of land. The government acquires land from communities, puts it all into this bank, and then leases it out to outside investors for big commercial projects. You can see how that fundamentally shifts who's in charge.
And activists are really worried about how this would play out. They've basically outlined this three-step process that they fear will lead to them losing their ancestral lands. Step 1, the government acquires community and tribal land. Step 2, that land gets pooled into this central bank. And Step 3, parcels of that land are then leased out to private investors who are often non-tribal.
And here's the real kicker. Critics argue that this whole process could just bypass the existing legal protections. Specifically, there's something called Meghalaya's Land Transfer Act, which was put in place for the very purpose of protecting tribal land. The fear is this new MSIPF Act creates a loophole. So what you have here are two totally clashing visions for the future of Meghalaya. It's a classic case of promise versus skepticism. On one side, you have the government's promise, economic development, more investment, and, this is the big one, job creation for local people. But on the other side, you have this deep-seated fear from local communities, that they'll lose their land, that their entire way of life will be upended, and that they'll be marginalized in their own home.
But let's talk about those jobs for a second. That's a really powerful promise, right? So why are local unions and activists so skeptical? Why isn't everyone celebrating the idea of new jobs?
Well, it really comes down to experience. The skepticism is rooted in what's happened in the past. They say they've seen this movie before. Past projects have disproportionately hired outsiders for the good, skilled roles. The act itself, it doesn't have any legally binding guarantees for local employment. So there's a real fear that the local workforce will just get the low-grade, menial jobs, while all the prime jobs are reserved for non-locals. It's a pattern they believe they've seen again and again.
So, in the face of all these fears, you can bet that activists and community groups are not just sitting back and watching. Let's look at how they're responding.
Yeah, they are definitely not staying silent. Groups like the Khasi Students Union, or KSU, are really leading the pushback against this act. They're mobilizing, they're challenging the law, and they're trying to get the word out to the public.
And their demands are pretty straightforward. First, they want the MSIPF Act either repealed entirely or radically amended. Second, they're launching awareness campaigns at the community level to explain what they see as the dangers of the law. And third, and this is so important, they want legally enforceable clauses added to guarantee high-quality employment for local tribal youth. Not just any jobs, but good jobs.
You know, this quote really sums up the entire conflict. It says, the core issue is a direct threat to the land and livelihood of indigenous communities. And that just drives it home, doesn't it? This isn't just about economic policy for them. It's about survival.
And this whole situation in Meghalaya, it brings up a much bigger question, one that communities all over the world are wrestling with. When progress and heritage collide, who gets to draw the line? It leaves you wondering, who really gets to decide what a place's future should look like?